Okay, so on page 5, so yesterday we addressed the issues, primarily those who claim that God is too big for individual supervision, or even to supervise the world at all. It's too lowly, it's too distant. And that's when we looked at Perek Bey's Shayach Lamuna, chapter 2 of part 2 of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe describes how creation is ongoing, because God is not merely the primary cause that's greater and bigger than everything else, but there's an infinite chasm, there's absolute nothingness that precedes creation, and therefore for it to stay in being, God has to be continuously invested. And therefore this idea of Hashem being too big for creation doesn't hold when you think of creation as something from nothing as opposed to just cause and effect. Likewise, the idea that Hashem knowing things has a problem because it means that there's something outside of him that he's knowing. So we explained from the Alter Rebbe Torah, that our sages, when they describe Hashem's knowledge, they say Golav Yadua, it's known to him, as opposed to he knows. So unlike my knowledge, which prior to my knowing it's outside of me and I have to go find out about it, for Hashem everything's automatically known to him because it's all within him. And the example we used, not that the text used, but that I offered, that based on other sources, is kind of like an imagination, where you're aware of every bit of your imagination simply because it only exists within you. So it's just not possible for some part of it to not be automatically known to you. Okay, so having established that the Eibishter, that God is aware of what's going on in creation, now the question becomes, you want to pass the tissues, please? The question now becomes, to what degree does Hashem know, or better phrased, to what degree does Hashem need to concern himself with the details of what's happening? And more importantly, to what end? Why is Hashem watching everything? Why can't he just allow everything to run as is? Just run on autopilot. Why does he have to be involved in watching every specific thing? Because Hashgacha doesn't just mean to watch, and doesn't just mean to know. It's supervision. It means there's a goal to why I'm watching this. When a mashgiach, when a kasher supervisor supervises a plant, not just says you should know. He's supervising it for a certain end. He wants to make sure that the food's kosher. So when we say that Hashem is supervising what's going on in creation, there's a certain end. There's a reason why Hashem wants to supervise it. And that will change the degree to which Hashem supervises the world based on why he's supervising it. So classically speaking, and I'm giving this introduction because classically speaking, when people think of Chassidus and the big Chiddush, the novelty that Chassidus introduced with this whole idea of divine supervision, is the stress is on the word Protis, specific. Right? And that prior to Chassidus, it was understood that there's Hashgacha Klalis. God doesn't need to follow every single blade of grass, because what for? Supervise it. Maybe he knows about it and it's all aware with it because it's all within him, etc. But why does it have to follow one specific blade of grass? It doesn't. He follows the specifics of man. But for everything else, Hashgacha Klalis, general supervision, just to make sure that things are operating on the whole the way it's supposed to. Make sure that cows don't go extinct, and make sure the blades of grass, generally speaking, are growing the way they're supposed to. But this blade of grass grows 2.5 centimeters, and that one grows 2.25 centimeters. Hashem has to supervise that. No reason to. That's generally speaking the way we view the distinction between pre and post Chassidus. And in post Chassidus, every single detail is important. But the question of why is not often addressed, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on here, the why of that. And that's going to change everything, and when we understand the why, we can get to the end where we reconcile the two, the pre Chassidus and the post Chassidus. Okay, so there's a bunch of texts that I bring from pre Chassidus. We don't have to go through all of them, because it's very repetitive, but I just bring them all so you can look at them later if you want, just to kind of indicate that this was common knowledge. Okay. So the first one comes from the Shemar Munim, which is a quasi-Kabbalistic book. It's like this. Kodim kol, first of all, davar tzarech at kodim kol, before anything, tzarech at ladas, you should know. And I put this here the first, because I want to highlight the point I was making before, that the Hashgacha klalis, when we say in Pri Chasidus that Hashem only supervises, generally speaking, for certain things, it's not a contradiction to everything we said before, that Hashem brings everything into being, and then He knows automatically what's going on. We shouldn't think that that's a contradiction to the notion that Hashem supervises everything on a general level. And I'm picking this up. I mean, these sources I collected, by the way, not because I'm a massive genius, but there's actually a letter from the Rabbi in the beginning of Vigirus where somebody asked the Rabbi for sources and explanation of Hashgacha Protis, and the lists a whole bunch of sources. So I found them mostly there. And if the Rebbe makes the point very strongly to keep in mind that even if you follow the view of Pri Chasidus that Hashem only supervises the generalities of certain things, it's not a contradiction to the fact that Hashem brings everything into being continuously, and it's not a contradiction to the fact that Hashem knows everything that's going on automatically. That everything is known to Him, as we explained yesterday. And this first paragraph here, you're going to make that clear. So, before everything, you should know, there is no small pula happening. Or big, that happens by happenstance. Without divine supervision. Everything exists and happens beside Hashgacha Ein Sof, within the realm, the secret of the infinite supervision, and its effect which expand from above to the end of all levels that can possibly be. Because without Him, capital H, Ein Shum Pu'ula, there is no happening, vashba, or influence, lashum nimtza, to anything, to any existence. To who, because He is Hamahava Kakol, Machaya Kol, He brings everything into being and gives it life, as we learned from part 2 of chapter 2 of Shaykh al-Munah. He brings everything into being. So therefore, obviously, everything that happens is under His supervision. Nothing outside of Him. And nothing exists without His power and desire. And not by happenstance or circumstance. Because He is the one that affects and is invested in, animates the divine attributes to which creation exists. The Teichim are kavos, and throughout the various different chariots, these different apparatuses that Hashem used to create existing with Teichim Malachim, and within angel, Teichim Galgalim, and within the Galgalim are the spheres, by Yisodis, and the various different elements, the Chol Tetzayah Aretz, and all the offspring of the earth, Ad the Kuna Achrim, till the very last bit, Shibatahomis, that's in the depth, in the bowels of the earth, Bekulim, the Bekas Aretz, Vashkachosai, everything is connected to His ray and His supervision. So first of all, you should know, even Shemer Munam, who's Pri Chasidus, is saying, everything is created by Him, and therefore nothing is outside of His purview. So this is the premise going forward. So even when we're going to read other sources that say, including the Shemer Munam in a second, which says that Hashgacha, that for anything that's not human, for animals, inanimate objects, there's Hashgacha Kolos, there's only a general supervision, not a specific supervision. That does not mean that He negates the notion that Hashem brings everything into being continuously. Hashem does. And yet He still does not need to watch every blade of grass that He Himself is bringing into being every single second. Doesn't need to supervise it, because there is no, as I was saying, supervision is with intent. It's not just knowledge, which we established yesterday, everything is known to Him automatically, and it's not just bringing it into being. There's a supervision with an intent. And because there is no specific intent for this blade of grass or that blade of grass, according to the previous pre-Chasidus understanding, therefore there's no reason to specifically supervise it, even if He knows everything automatically. I want to make this point very clear. As we'll see here. But however, even though I just finished saying that Hashem brings everything into being, and He elaborates a little bit more based on Kabbalah, which I skipped out, but the Hashgachas, the various different levels of supervision, and their reasons. I see fit to divide them into 10 different types. As I found it in the books of the Kabbalah, specifically in a book called Al-Lima, which I don't know what it is. And they're the following. I'm not going to go through all 10 levels, but I'm making this point here that even though He begins with Hashem creates everything and brings everything into being, nevertheless He still goes to different levels of supervision. And they all come down to Tameim, the reasons, the intent. Hashgacha Rishonah, the first level, Hashgacha Kalelas, is a general supervision. L'chol mini environment, to all different types of creation that exist in the world. Hazeh she'ein bali gmul, that are not worthy of reward and punishment. And that's what gmul is. And there is the key. Pri Chasidus, the reason why Hashem is supervising anything is for the sake of reward and punishment. And therefore there's no reason to supervise the specifics of one blade of grass over another, because one blade of grass is not getting punished or rewarded any different than the other blade of grass. So all creation, that are not those that would receive reward or punishment, and there are the three categories of Baal Chai, the animal kingdom, Sameach, that which grows a dome, and the inanimate, which is basically everything that's non-human. In each of these categories, inanimate, plantation, plants, and animals, are divided into endless species. Canada is well known. And the way in which these elements, these creations are supervised is through ministering angels that are responsible for each of these levels. Now, obviously, angels don't have free choice; they're doing exactly what Hashem wants. But there's a certain level of removal from Hashem's direct supervision. In that, in other words, Hashem has to make sure that grass continues to exist. So He supervises grass as a species, not as individual blades, even though it all exists within Him, and even though He's aware of all of them automatically, and even though He creates all of them every single second. But in terms of supervising them, why would Hashem need to supervise them any more than make sure that grass exists? No reason to. Etc. Okay. However, Hashgacha Protis, specific supervision. For example, if this specific ox is going to live or die, will this worm survive or will it be trampled on? Will this achpish is like a kind of like a rodent, will eat that fly? Okay, it's been or these various different details. The medium through which Hashem supervises these beings, which are this ministering angels, God did not give them the ability to, or God did not structure them such that they follow each and every individual worm, whether it's crushed or survived. And all the various different animals, and therefore the various different details, the various different things that grow, or the inanimate objects will not be supervised on these petty details. Because the intent for which Hashem created these animals exists and is accomplished just by their species surviving. And therefore that's all Hashem has to supervise, is the species of worms surviving. Yes? Good. Again, it all comes down to intent. Specific supervision in the pre-Chassidus view is for reward and punishment. And if anything is not reward and punishment, the reason why Hashem has supervised them is to make sure that the species survives. And to that extent, Hashem supervises it. That's Hashgacha Klalis, general supervision, as opposed to Hashgacha Protis, specific supervision. And therefore, therefore, there's no reason for Hashem to supervise the individuality of them. And therefore, all the details of what happens to their individualism is absolute chance and happenstance. And not because Hashem decreed that cow should die. Unless that cow has some effect on a human being. Now Hashem has to supervise it, to make sure it's either rewarding or punishing the human being. God decides He wants to reward someone with 5 cows, so Hashem has to make sure to select 5 cows to bring it over to that human being and make sure they don't die on the way. But otherwise, the cows that are roaming the fields of Africa, that make no difference to any human being, whether one individual cow lives or survives, happenstance. Okay. I'm not going to go through all these sources because there's enough for that. So you can see the next page, on page 7, the Ramban, the Mer Nevuchim, they all say a very similar thing. But he gives 10 categories, because as you climb the categories of human beings, you get higher and higher levels of supervision for greater punishment or greater reward. Like, for example, the Rambam writes about human beings. In other words, for created beings that are non-human, that don't have reward and punishment, it's just generalistic, make sure that the species survives, unless one individual cow has some effect on a human being. But then within human beings, it depends. Jews, non-Jews, tzaddik, rasha, for example, the Rambam writes, what's the punishment for a rasha, for a wicked person? Is that Hashem takes him out of the purview of his specific supervision and throws him into the general supervision, the mikra. And once a person's in mikra, once a person gets into the level of happenstance, just generally speaking, part of the human race, then it's possible he'll do very well and possibly won't do so well. But he's been taken out of the divine specific supervision, for example. So there's very endless levels in that. But it all comes down to reward and punishment. If there's no reward and punishment, there's no reason for Hashem to supervise the individual specific item. Rambam on page 7, page 8, Sefer Chinuch. Actually, Rabbi quotes the Sefer Chinuch as proof that this was the prevailing accepted view. Sorry? On top, Mitzvah Kuf Samaches. Oh, which one is that? I'm not sure. I don't remember. Here is it. Let's see. Okay, look. V'yesh mehen kites yachshvu ki, a little top of the line, towards the end of the line after the comma. V'yesh mehen kites yachshvu ki Hashgacha Shemes Baruch Hashem Baruch Hu. There are groups of people who think that the supervision of the blessed one, of the Holy One, blessed be He, who al kol elements in every single detail of the world, ben be'al chayim, whether they're animals like kol shar dvarim, other things, claim mean to say that the smallest little thing shouldn't move in this physical world. Rak b'cheftzei Baruch Hu, whether only if God desires it, and by his decree, to the point that they think that when one leaf falls off a tree, God said, oh, that leaf should fall. It's impossible, these people think, says the Chinuch, that it should be delayed or brought early, the time of which it's going to fall, even for one moment. This is completely this is way too far from logic to think that God's sitting there making sure one leaf falls at one point in time. It's funny because that's the exact example we all use in Chassidus to describe that the leaf fell exactly at the right time. But here he's saying that that's a ridiculous notion. And then he says that there are extremes who say that Hashem doesn't supervise anything at all, and if it comes to the conclusion that there's general supervision for everything and specific supervision for man. But there are points to this to show that this is prevailing understanding pre Chassidus. Okay, there's Sefer Ikim there, which we're going to leave out. Now we get to Chassidus on page 9. Everything in Chassidus has to have a makar and nigla. Everything in Chassidus has its makar, has its source in pre-Chassidic texts. So we come to a Rashi in the Gemara, which indicates the Chassidic view. It's one version of Rashi. There's a few, Rebbe Rashab in a few different places lists a few different proofs from the Gemara for the Chassidic version, that Hashem supervises every single detail of this world, including whether or not that leaf falls off at a specific time. And he brings one proof from one version of Rashi in the Gemara. The Gemara says like this, in Chulin, page 9. Rabbi Yochanan would say, you have a chazi, shalach, I think it's a kind of fish of some sort. Yeah, it's a kind of fish. Amar would say, your judgment, Hashem's judgment to him, Rabbi, goes to the great depth, even to this fish. You have a chazi nimla, when you would see a worm, Amar that your righteousness is like a great mountain. So, as she says there, even a worm has a great life.
Worm or ants?
Isn't one nimla a worm?
I think it's Hebrews, ants. Modern Hebrew.
Yeah, maybe. Thought it was a worm. Okay.
Hebrew.
So you see the first version of Rashi there. She's manasa shechol lishboy lases nikmascha b'tigas hayam lamas amazman lamas. That Hashem's judged to take revenge on the fish, to make sure that those who are ready to die. And that's on a specific fish, as opposed to, just generally speaking, making sure the species of fish survives. So this is one of the proofs from that the Rebbe Rashab cites for the Chassidus version, that Hashem does supervise each individual item. Okay. Okay, we'll look at the next two texts, but quickly. The first is look at they both come from the Frierdiker Rebbe. One's look at the Deburim, one's in the Maimer. And look at the Deburim. This is the famous look at the Deburim, where the Frierdiker Rebbe describes how he was walking with his father and his father was telling him that each leaf has exact life force. Okay, Baal Shem Tov Nishma said, Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory, Masber explains that to each individual creation, that a specific space above for every creation and formation. Makam Yuchad Behesem Moshe has a special place in heaven that's appropriate for its being. Ein Doima, you cannot compare Doima with Sameach, the inanimate to the plants, Sameach L'chai, plants to animals, V'chai L'Medaber, and animals to human beings. Medaber Gufa, and within human beings, Yisrael Him Am Kareivai, the Jewish people are His close nation. However, so it's true that each individual has his own different level. Hashgacha Protis, but divine specific supervision. Higam al Yitzur Haze'er B'Yosers, even the smallest of creations. V'hu Messiah, and he concludes, the Baal Shem Tov concludes, Shes Hashgacha Protis Shel Am Kareivai Yisborach Iyef Shel Atayr. But the specific supervision that's on the Jewish people, you cannot compare. So in other words, everything has divine supervision, but there's a distinction between the specific supervision of the grass and the specific supervision of the Jew. And this is where we have to understand a little bit what this means. In other words, so where's the distinction between Chassidus and B'fri Chassidus? In Pri Chassidus, Hashem specifically supervises each individual human being to make sure he's getting rewarded and punished the way he's supposed to. Hashem supervises the species of everything that's not human to make sure that the species survives as a whole, because that's their purpose. And here the Frierdiker is telling us, the Baal Shem Tov says, that each individual creation has specific supervision, and yet the specific supervision of the Jew is different. That does go in levels. So what's this all about? Okay, I'm sorry, running out of time. We're moving a little fast, but next page, in page 11. This mimer is where it's really at. Akein Yomru. The third word on the top of the page. Okay, do as well known, but Inyan Hashgacha Protis, when it comes to, with respect to the issue of divine supervision, specific supervision. Shemavai Rabbeinu Baal Shem Tov, our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, explains, Deloiz Levad, not only the Chol Protis Tinus and Avarim Minayim, not only is the various different detailed movements of creation. Hibashgacha Protis, but Baruch is by specific supervision from the Creator. Hashgacha Protis Alazuhi Chayus Haniva V'Kiyumai. And here's an important line. Where does the divine supervision come from? That is its life. So, premise number one. It's not as if creation comes from one place, like in previous generations there we saw from the Shem Ramunim. Hashem brings everything into being. Fine, that's true. But then there is a supervision to see is everything being rewarded and punished. Comes Chassidus and says no. That creation, bringing every single thing into creation, that is its supervision. This gets back to what we read yesterday from Alter Rebbe about how everything is known to him. Why is everything known to him as opposed to Hashem knows everything? Everything is known to him because it's created within him. That is where Hashgacha Protis comes from. And that's, sorry?
It's related to yourself as the Chol Rega V'Rega.
That's correct.
He's creating something now, then he's creating everything exactly as it is.
That's correct. How does the Alter Rebbe in chapter 2 of Shaykh Emunah disprove those that say that there's no such thing as divine supervision? He disproves it by saying that he creates it every single second. That's where the supervision comes from. So if Hashem is invested in creating every single detail of creation every single second, then he is supervising every single individual creation. Which means now we're shifting. The reason why Hashem is supervising is not for some post-creation reason, but for within creation. Not post-creation. Hashem creates everything and now he's supervising to reward and punish. No. Within creation, within the very moment of creation, that is where his supervision comes from. Now, what does that mean? And that's because if Hashem is bringing every single thing into being, it's because he's bringing it into being for a purpose. And therefore, Hashem has to supervise, is it fulfilling the purpose? So we're switching the reason for supervision. Not to see if it should be rewarded and punished, but to see if it's fulfilling the purpose for which Hashem created it. It's connected to creation, not post-creation. In other words, in previous generations, Hashgacha was viewed, Hashem brought everything into being. Fantastic. Now, let's see if it's behaving the way it's supposed to, and we'll follow it to reward and punish. comes to this and says, no, Hashem is bringing every single thing into being every moment for a purpose. Now with that comes a supervision. Is it in the right time and place to fulfill its purpose?
That Rashi is a little bit hard to understand.
The fish fulfilled its purpose, now it's time to die.
So what does he use the word the kama?
I think it's a reference to the verse. I'm not sure. It's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because it makes it sound like it's a punishment for fishes being...
Oh, yeah, I hear. I don't know. Now the Fidikabah adds another big chiddush here, which everything I said till now, you can find in previous sources in Chassidus. This idea that everything is brought into being for a purpose, and therefore Hashem is following each individual item to make sure it's fulfilling its purpose. But now the Fidikabah adds a massive chiddush, and the Rebbe quotes this a few times, and the Rebbe highlights this in that letter I mentioned earlier. Moreover, the Tenua Protis v'Niva Prati, the specific movement of a specific creature. Hareish yachas klali, it has a general connection l'klalis kavanas habriya, to the general purpose of all of creation. This is a massive chiddush. Not only does the blade of grass have its own purpose, and therefore as Hashem is creating it, Hashem is supervising it to make sure it's being created in the right place in the right time to fulfill its purpose. But moreover, the purpose for which that blade of grass is in this place in this time is connected to the general purpose for which Hashem created everything. Because Hashem doesn't have trillions of purposes. He has one purpose for creation. And therefore every single individual item that's created with its specific purpose is connected to that one general purpose. So this blade of grass is not just important for its own purpose to be in this place and time, but it's important for every single thing that ever existed, and for every single thing that ever will exist. It's important that this blade of grass be here now. For whatever master divine plan Hashem has for the netzutzes and for the sparks that need to be collected. But it's important for all of that this blade of grass be here. It's a big, big chiddush. By way of example, the movement of one specific grass somewhere deep in the forest, or in some tall mountain, or the depths of some valley, where no human being ever walked there. Not only, in other words, he's telling you, it's not like we read before in the Shemar Munim that if there's an animal which is somehow going to affect the human being, then there's divine specific supervision. No human being ever walked there. Not only is the movement of that blade of grass, which no human ever came in contact with, whether it moves right or left, forward or backward, throughout the entire extent of its grass life, Protis is not only is that by divine specific supervision, that he himself, God said, decreed, that this specific blade of grass, this amount of time and days and hours and months, and during this specific amount of time, Yisrael should spin the Yichav and Shebent right and left, the front of the Lacha, back and forth, to this specific amount of times. That's how detailed it is. Moreover, the Tenua Sadesha Prati Alazu, that the specific movements of that specific blade of grass, the Shayachas is connected to the general purpose for which the entire creation was created. Why? Because by combining all the various different details of everything that happened, to the endless details, of no end, the various different, the millions and trillions of details, of the millions of trillions of different things that exist within the four categories of the inanimate, the animal, the plants, and the beings, all of the combined purposes for all those things, that's how the divine purpose for everything is fulfilled. Only by the combination of the fulfillment of every detail's purpose. So therefore every single detail is connected to everything. I really want to finish this text because it's important. If so, not only is the specific movement of each specific grass come by divine specific supervision, moreover, the movement of one specific blade of grass will fulfill the purpose for the entirety of creation, because it's integral to the purpose of everything. This teaches us a very deep message in our service of Hashem. Because Chassidus is here to teach us how to serve Hashem, not to tell us about blades of grass. And how does that affect us? When a person considers the following: if one specific blade of grass of the various different amounts of times it moves, and the manners in which it moves. If that comes by divine specific supervision, and that movement is important to the fulfillment of the entire purpose of the entire creation, then man had a vadai, certainly every movement of his is specifically supervised in every single details of the matters of his needs, and therefore how much do you have to be certain that you don't mess up? That is, you should not get in the way of what Hashem is trying to do for you. So if a blade of grass and every single detail of its movement is important for the entire creation, then certainly everything you do is important for all of creation. And this gets back to the question we asked before. It's true that Hashem is supervising every single individual detail. Why? And every single and the detailed supervision of every single detailed creation is because Hashem comes along with the fact that Hashem is bringing everything into being every single moment. And every single thing that's being brought into being every single moment has a specific purpose, and therefore it's being supervised to make sure it's in the right place at the right time to fulfill its purpose, which is connected to the entire purpose. But we can still appreciate that there are degrees to purpose. What is more central to the general purpose? In other words, the specific purpose that this blade of grass has is only in the context of the purpose for all of creation. Who's at the center of the purpose for all of creation? Me and you. So if Hashem is watching the details of the spinning of the movement to the right and left of the one blade of grass or where it's going to go because it's important to the entire creation, then certainly the specific place, the specific time, and the specific people, and the specific things you meet everywhere in your life, certainly that's connected to all of creation. So there are levels to Hashgacha Protis. Even though we're negating, in other words, so the distinction between Hashgacha Klalos, the general supervision described before Chassidus, and the Hashgacha Protis described after Chassidus is, Hashgacha Klalos is make sure that your species survives. Because that's all we need them for. Hashgacha Protis says, no, we have to make sure each individual blade of grass is doing what it's supposed to do for the general purpose. So we're switching from reward and punishment to purpose-driven. Now if that's the case, within purpose there are levels. What is most central to the purpose? And the more central you get to the purpose, the more specific the supervision, or the more important that specific supervision carries in Hashem's grand scheme of things. Is this human being going to do the right thing now to fulfill the entire purpose?
So what if he doesn't? So he's not negating Bechir Chavshis, he's specifically saying you
Absolutely not, of course not.
You get in the way, so then what happens to the grand plan? The next moment Hashem creates it a little bit differently than he otherwise would have?
This is where one of the most...
Will, right? So
sorry?
Hashem gives us free will.
Yeah, which I have, the next page has sources to reconcile Hashgacha Protis and free choice, but we don't have time. But to answer the question, there's a pasuk in Megillah when Mordechai tells Esther to come and save the king, to save the Jewish people. So Mordechai says, maybe this is why you were put in this situation. And then he says to her, if you don't show up,
Hashem will find another
Hashem will find another way to do it. In other words, Hashem orchestrated the world that you should be here at this time to fulfill your purpose. You don't do it, Hashem's purpose will get done, and the only person who has lost out is you have lost out being part of the great grand purpose. And that's another distinction between you and the blade of grass. The blade of grass can never ruin its purpose. There's a Gemara which says that David HaMelech looks at the frog and is jealous of the frog because the frog is praising Hashem every single second. Because every time a frog croaks, it's by divine supervision. That's what Hashem wants to do at this moment. Hashem wants it to croak. So each croak is like a praise for Hashem. But a human being has a free choice. So a human being is put into the right place at the right time by divine supervision so he can fulfill his purpose. And if he doesn't, Hashem will find some other way to fulfill that purpose. So who lost out in the grand scheme? You failed to be part of this beautiful purpose that Hashem has put you for. To get to the crux of it, the real chiddush of Hashgacha Protis and Chassidus is not that Hashem supervises the details. That's an outcome of the much deeper chiddush. The deeper chiddush is that divine supervision comes for the purpose of purpose, not simply reward and punishment. So what happens to you in your life is not the result of how you behaved yesterday, but it's in anticipation of how you're going to behave when you're in that situation. It's the reverse. When you come to a situation, the question is not, why did this happen to me? The question is, what can I do here? Because that's why I've been put here. Not for reward and punishment, but not simply for reward and punishment, but to fulfill some purpose that Hashem put me here for.